This warrior, Lieutenant Harmon, come on. Come on.
Hey, put your phones on quiet. Got one.
This warrior, First Lieutenant Stephen Harmon, has been called forward to receive the knighthood in the Honorable Order of St. George Black Medallion. St. George was born about AD 280 in the region of Greece known as Cappadocia, where he was known as the Nestor of Cappadocia, and was a member of the Roman Emperor's mounted guard. In 303 AD, the emperor issued a decree to destroy all Christian churches and sacred writings while outlawing the Christian faith. The Nestor, a recent convert to the faith, tore down the written order and stood against the emperor. For this act of bravery and defiance, he was imprisoned, tortured, and finally executed. After word of his sacrifice spread, early Christians changed the Nestor's name to St. George, a saint that would symbolize bravery, dedication to faith, and decency. Later, in the 12th century, more than 1,000 years after his execution, the citizens of the small Italian village claimed to have seen him appear suddenly out of the midst to slay a fierce dragon that had been tormenting them. This is in the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, where there's a lot of superstition, The heroic image of St. George defeating the dragon symbolizes the gallantry and righteous bravery of mounted warriors and the ultimate victory of good over evil. Throughout history, warriors of many nations have related the accounts of St. George appearing on battlefields to help the righteous achieve victory. St. George is unique among all the saints, in that he is the only one portrayed as fighting mounted, as in you, fighting mounted. His name has been linked to famous battles, military orders, and cavalry forces around the world. In fact, to this day, the Red Cross of St. George is the main element in the national colors of Great Britain, the Union Jack, and in the country of Georgia, where we see the Red Cross. In 1986, the United States Armor Association established the Honorable Order of St. George to recognize the very best tankers and cavalrymen among its members. Those of you sitting in this audience tonight are among those best tankers and cavalrymen out there. So you should too aspire to be a knight in the Order of St. George. To all here present, know ye that First Lieutenant Stephen M. Harmon, having been recognized for long and honorable service to armor and cavalry, is hereby admitted as a distinguished knight in the Order of St. George, Black Medallion. Now let me tell you a little bit about the Order of St. George. Again, it was established in 1986. There were three original classifications of the Order of St. George. There was the Gold Medallion. The Gold Medallion is awarded to those long-standing members of the armor and cavalry tradition of exemplary service. Many retired general officers and retired leaders, command sergeants majors, out there who have served most notably 30 years or more. The Silver Order of St. George is generally awarded to those leaders, armor and cavalrymen, who have achieved a status of approximately 20 years of service or more, and most times is awarded to those who have retired from the armor and cavalry community. The Bronze Order of St. George is generally awarded to company commanders and first sergeants and above who have achieved great distinction in the armor and cavalry community. The Black Medallion was established last year to those lieutenants and sergeants who have achieved great distinction in a short period of time in the armor and cavalry community, most notably in the counterinsurgency environment in Iraq and Afghanistan. First Lieutenant Harmon, please kneel and receive your knighthood. At this time, Commanding Officer of 2nd Battalion, 12th Cavalry, I hereby knight you, First Lieutenant Stephen Harmon, in the Order of St. George, Black Medallion. Knight, please stand. concludes the formal portion of the ceremony. And at this time, I also present you a certificate signed by General Milano and then General Retired Tucker as the President of the U.S. Army Association. Well done. The floor is now yours to say a few words if you wish.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, I couldn't be more humbled to be given an award like this. A platoon leader is generally, he is responsible for his platoon, whether good and bad. And on his best day, he is the sum of his parts. And lucky for me, during the deployment to Iraq this last year and up at JSS Jenkins, I had a lot of very good parts. And I got the opportunity to head them and lead them. And I couldn't be more privileged to have gotten to do that. To those soldiers, you know, this award will hang in my mind alongside their faces, you know, really for the rest of my life, I think. Not because the award itself is that significant, because it represents so much of what we accomplished together. And they're not here tonight, but I want you to know how much they meant to me, because it's very important to me. To them, you know, I'll hang up my wall, and I hope that they'll be okay with me keeping it for them, because they own a piece of it, and they own a piece of me. I never had to give them an order that I can ever think of, that I had to say, you're going to do this because I told you to. They just did it because they're willing to follow me. For whatever reason, they're willing to do what I asked them to, time and time again, and they trusted me implicitly. And it was a great responsibility. I think I'm a bit like Mowgli in the Jungle Book, okay? I wasn't raised by my own kind. I was raised by good sergeants that, when it was their duty to do so, trained me to be a good officer. And I couldn't be more appreciative for those sergeant first classes and staff sergeants that trained me. I think about my father. I couldn't be more appreciative of him. He taught me in Boy Scouting how to shoot, move, and communicate. I felt when I showed up to basic training, all the basic tasks they taught me, I could do far better because of what my dad had showed me before. He didn't know he was training a soldier, you know, but that's how it happened. My mother, wonderful woman. She has a very tender heart. And what she taught me is that you have to always consider the consequences of your action. Even if it comes time that you're going to fire that round, you're going to take life from 4 people. And you may be just in doing so. Okay, there's a lot of consequences that come to that action, a lot of lives you're affecting. Especially in the war we fight now, every move you make, especially as a platoon leader, and even as a soldier, there can be reverberations that last, I would say decades, generations, because of how you behave on the battlefield. Sir and Sergeant Major May, thank you for your support and recognition. I appreciate it.
Well done. Cool. Formally here, as a member of the executive committee of the U.S. Army Armor Association, we award this award far too few times. You've seen this award if you've been around for a little while, hung around the necks of company commanders, first sergeants, sergeants major, and battalion commanders when we go to these balls and whatnot. That's a great occasion to wear it, but more importantly, it's a recognition of those great leadership traits that the awardee has and exemplifies every day. Sergeant Valvano, his former platoon sergeant, nominated him for the award. Okay, and so it's a non-commissioned officer that made sure that you're wearing this tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You know, it's just a sign that he really has a great amount of trust and confidence in you, and we do as well. So that's why I wanted to do this tonight in front of the company, out here on the gunnery range, mounted warriors you all are, okay? And every one of you out there could aspire to be a knight in the Order of St. George, really. You know, black medallion for non-commissioned officers and our first lieutenants and second lieutenants out there, okay? It doesn't mean soldiers can't be nominated for it and get it either. But usually it takes me a non-commissioned officer or a platoon leader to get that. Okay? In fact, you know, when I asked how many of you guys are awardees, I was actually kind of taken aback that we don't have some of our other folks out here who are tankers, cavalrymen, haven't gotten a bronze medallion previously as well. So I want to take this tradition and continue to move forward with it. Cool.
I know you could be sleeping, Jen, so I appreciate you coming.